Four friends disappear in 1988. 18 years later, one of their mothers finds this. Asterisk, asterisk. The soft afternoon light gently bathed the streets of Galway that June 22, 1988, casting a warm golden glow on the house facades. It was a small, quiet, and familiar town where everyone seemed to know each other and life flowed without major disruptions. But that calm was about to be shattered forever. "Come on, Ethan, hurry up," shouted Lucas from the street, waving the little four-leaf clover in his hand. "You're always the last one." Ethan, his red curls bouncing over his forehead and his green eyes sparkling with excitement, quickly grabbed his jacket and ran to the door. "I'm coming, Mom," he called out, flashing a wide, innocent smile at Emily. From the kitchen, Emily watched her son with a tender yet uneasy smile. It was impossible not to feel a twinge of worry every time Ethan went out with his friends. But she knew they were good boys. Lucas always made her laugh with his impressions. Noah was the responsible one. And Jordan, though quiet, had a calm, perceptive presence that reassured everyone. "I'll be back before dinner, Mom," Ethan promised, gently touching his earlobe, as he always did when excited. Emily nodded from the window, waving softly as she watched the four boys walk down the street, laughing and playfully shoving each other. It looked like such an ordinary, everyday moment. But that day, that image would be burned into her memory forever. Because that afternoon, Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan never came home. 18 years later, in September 2006, Emily sat on the Chithan living room floor, surrounded by old boxes. Every photo, every toy, every little memory struck her chest with a gentle but persistent ache, reviving the pain and hope she had never managed to extinguish completely. She took a deep breath and carefully pulled out an old photograph, its edges yellowed with age. A chill ran down her spine as she looked at it. There they were, the four boys sitting on the wooden bench in the backyard, smiling, innocent, unaware of what fate awaited them. Ethan with his freckles and bouncing red curls. Lucas, tall and blonde, proudly holding his clover. Noah adjusting his thick glasses. And Jordan absent-mindedly flipping his old coin between his fingers. But there was something else in that photo, something she had never noticed before. Her heart began to race as she brought the picture closer to her eyes. Just above the backyard wall, clearly visible, a hand peeked out, barely there, like someone was hiding behind the fence, watching them without their knowledge. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, the air rushing out of her lungs. A whirlwind of emotions seized her as she stared at the image over and over again. How had no one seen this before? Why had the police never mentioned anything? For years, Emily had kept that photo, but never had she noticed that chilling detail. Her mind raced back to that fateful afternoon. She relived the endless hours waiting for Ethan's return, the growing desperation when he didn't show up, the fruitless searches all over town. She felt again that deep, hollow sensation when she realized life had changed forever. Darkness was beginning to slowly cover the city. When Emily finally stood up, her body trembled slightly, but her resolve had never been stronger. She couldn't ignore what she had just discovered. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had really happened that day. She walked slowly to the back door, her breath quickening. When she opened it, the chill of evening brushed her face. The backyard lay in shadows, silent and nearly unchanged since that afternoon so many years ago. She stepped toward the fence where the photo had been taken. The wood, old and weathered by time, seemed to still hold the echoes of laughter and play from children no longer there. Emily slid her fingers over the rough, faded surface, trying to imagine who might have been there that day, hidden behind the wall. Suddenly, her fingers touched something unexpected. Tiny grooves, barely noticeable, could be felt beneath her fingertips. With trembling hands, she pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and shone it carefully across the surface. There, carved discreetly into the aged wood, were strange symbols that she immediately recognized. It was a secret code Ethan and his friends used to communicate something she remembered, seeing once in Noah's scattered papers. A shiver ran through her again. What did these symbols mean? Why were they carved here, so carefully hidden all these years? Emily looked up at the now dark sky, a mix of fear and hope rising in her chest. After so much time, after so many tears and sleepless nights, she finally had a clue, a place to begin. She looked again at the photo still gripped tightly in her hand, focusing once more on that mysterious hand over the wall. A deep certainty settled within her. Someone else had been there that day. Someone knew the truth. And Emily was ready to go to any lengths to find out who. Ethan, she whispered into the cold, silent night. This time I won't stop until I find you. Carefully, Emily tucked the photo into the pocket of her coat and stepped slowly back into the house. Her eyes lingered one last time on the carved symbols on the fence. Those little messages hiding secrets no one had discovered in nearly 2 decades. She knew this search might lead her to painful, dark places. She knew it might reopen wounds that had never truly healed. But the possibility of discovering the truth, of finding even a single answer, was stronger than any fear or doubt. Emily softly closed the back door behind her, leaving the yard in shadows once more, but this time with renewed determination. With a fire that would not be easily extinguished, because now she had something she had never had before, a clear, tangible direction. The hand in the photo, the secret symbols on the fence. Each tiny detail pointed toward a truth that had remained hidden for far too long. And that truth, Emily thought as she walked slowly back to the living room, would not stay buried much longer. Emily slowly sat down at the kitchen table, still shaken by the recent discovery of the strange symbols carved into the backyard fence. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a cup of lukewarm tea she'd made to calm her nerves. She couldn't stop staring at the darkness beyond the window, wondering who or what could be behind those secret messages. Her mind was a storm. Then she remembered Michael Turner. The old retired detective had been known for his skepticism, his stubbornness, and his ability to solve the toughest cases in Galway for decades. Emily knew convincing him wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that if anyone could help unravel this mystery, it was him. I can't ignore this, she told herself firmly. I need his help. Without another thought, she picked up the phone and searched through her address book for a number long forgotten. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then Michael's raspy, familiar voice came through. Who is this? Michael, it's Emily Harris, Sean's mother. I need your help, Emily said, her voice steady, though her emotions quivered underneath. A long silence followed on the other end. Emily could picture the old detective, his sharp eyes narrowing as his brow furrowed. It's been many years, Emily. What could I possibly do for you now? He finally replied in his typically blunt tone. I found something new, Michael. Some symbols, messages carved into the fence. I think there's more. Something we all missed. A deep, heavy sigh came through the line. All right, Emily. I'll come by first thing in the morning. Don't touch anything else, understood? That night, Emily barely closed her eyes. Anxiety and hope kept her awake, turning the meaning of those symbols over and over in her mind. Morning crept in slowly cold and gray, like most mornings in Galway. At exactly 9, Emily heard the familiar rumble of Michael's old car outside. The detective stepped out slowly, his tall, hunched figure wrapped in a worn coat. His face, etched with age, wore its usual look of exhaustion. "Show me the symbols." "Emily," he said plainly, greeting her with a small nod. She led him straight to the backyard, where he examined the carvings meticulously. His wrinkled, knobby fingers traced the markings with care and precision. "These aren't random doodles. The boys had their own code." "This must mean something specific," he murmured, adjusting the old flat cap he always wore. Emily then remembered seeing something similar years ago, when Noah used to scribble secret notes on scattered papers. "There might be a clue at the old cabin by Lake Corrib," Michael said thoughtfully. It was one of their favorite spots, according to the old reports. No one ever did a thorough search of that place. Emily nodded firmly. Without wasting time, they both climbed into Michael's car and headed for the lake. The detective drove in silence, while Emily tried to quiet her racing mind. Lake Corrib appeared before them, vast and still, its dark surface reflecting the gray sky above. The old cabin, forgotten and covered in creeping vines, emerged like a ghost from the dense vegetation that surrounded it. As she stepped out of the car, Emily felt a deep chill crawl down her spine. The air was thick with lost memories, soaked in a sadness that seemed to stop time. They entered slowly. The musty scent of dampness and mold clung to everything. The walls, blanketed in cobwebs, still held the echoes of laughter and secrets from the four boys. Emily's heart broke all over again as she imagined the innocent adventures Ethan and his friends must have shared here, never suspecting what was to come. Michael moved calmly through the cabin, sweeping his flashlight across the room. His sharp eyes paused at carvings on the walls, small drawings identical to the symbols found on the fence. "Look at this, Emily," Michael said, pointing at the marks. "It's the exact same code." They exchanged a silent look. Then they decided to search the land around the cabin. With an old shovel they found nearby, Michael began digging in a slightly sunken patch close to the structure. Tension grew as the soil was unearthed. Finally, after several minutes of quiet digging, the shovel struck something solid. Michael dropped it to the ground and began clearing the dirt with his hands, slowly uncovering several items wrapped carefully in worn fabric. Emily knelt beside him, her trembling hands lifting the objects. The first was a small, wilted four-leaf clover, immediately recognizable as the one Lucas always carried. Then came an old coin, worn by time, which she knew had belonged to Jordan. "Oh my God," Emily whispered as tears slid down her cheeks. They were here. They were really here. Michael studied the items with a solemn, grim expression. "This proves the original investigation was a complete failure," he said bitterly. "Someone knew about this place and stayed silent. But why?" Emily felt a powerful mix of anger and relief, conflicting emotions that hit her all at once. For the first time in many years, they had real evidence. Something that could reopen the case and perhaps finally lead to the answers they had sought for so long. As they carefully wrapped the recovered objects to take them back, Michael suddenly snapped his head toward the forest's edge, eyes fixed on something. "Emily, someone's watching us," he whispered tensely. Emily froze. Following his gaze, she clearly saw a tall, hunched man partially hidden behind an old tree. He wore dark clothes, and part of his face was obscured, but his posture made it clear he'd been observing them the whole time. As soon as he realized he'd been seen, the figure turned and bolted, vanishing into the woods within seconds. "Wait," Michael shouted, taking a few quick steps before stopping. Knowing there was no chance of catching him, they stood still, hearts pounding. The sudden appearance of that man added more fear and uncertainty to an already tense situation. But one thing was undeniable: someone else knew they were getting close. Someone who clearly had something to hide. Emily looked back at the forest, clutching the boy's recovered belongings tightly. "This isn't over, Michael," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "Not until we know the whole truth." The detective nodded silently, knowing all too well the real danger was only just beginning. Michael and Emily stood frozen in front of the dark forest where the mysterious man had vanished just seconds earlier. Their breaths were heavy, and Emily felt her heart still pounding violently in her chest. The image of the stranger watching them from the shadows was burned into her memory. "We have to find that man," Emily finally whispered with determination, breaking the heavy silence between them. "He knows something." Michael nodded slowly, adjusting his cap as his eyes carefully scanned the terrain. "I think I know who it might be," he said at last. "Victor Grayson. He lives alone, not far from here. Strange man, paranoid, always avoids people. He probably saw us heading toward the cabin and decided to watch. Do you think he was involved?" Emily asked, a mix of fear and hope in her voice. "I don't know, Emily, but we're going to find out." They walked slowly back to the old car. The road to Victor's house wasn't far, hidden among tall trees and overgrown bushes, almost invisible from the main road. When they arrived, Emily saw the small cabin with its dirty windows and a roof full of holes. A heavy air of abandonment and secrecy hung around the place. They stepped out cautiously and approached the front door. Michael knocked firmly. "Victor Grayson," he called out loudly. "We need to speak with you. It's important." There was no reply, but Emily clearly felt someone watching from inside. Michael knocked again, harder this time. "We know you were at the lake cabin. We just want answers. Do you remember the missing boys? You can help us understand what really happened." For a few seconds, there was total silence. Then they heard slow, heavy footsteps approaching. The door opened just a crack, revealing the thin, hunched figure of Victor. His unkempt beard and sunken eyes shimmered with fear and mistrust. "What do you want?" "I've got nothing to say," he muttered in a raspy voice. Emily stepped slightly forward, locking eyes with him, firm but compassionate. "Please, Victor. I'm Ethan's mother. It's been many years, and we still don't know the truth. I can see it in your eyes. You know something. Help me find peace." Victor hesitated, his eyes filling with tears as he looked at her anguished face. Finally, with a tired gesture, he opened the door fully, inviting them into his cluttered, modest home. Inside, the air was gloomy and neglected. The place was filled with old objects and accumulated junk. Victor sat in a worn-out chair, avoiding their gaze. "I haven't spoken in years out of fear," Victor began, his voice trembling. "But I remember that day. I was near the lake gathering firewood. I saw a blue pickup truck parked close to the main road, right at the forest's edge." "A blue pickup?" Michael interrupted with interest. "Why didn't you say anything back?" Then Victor lowered his head, nervously fidgeting with his trembling hands. "Because I was afraid. There were powerful people involved, people who could hurt me if I talked. No one would have believed me. They'd say I was crazy." "Who were they, Victor?" Emily asked gently, trying to hold back her desperation. He swallowed hard, looking around as if the walls themselves might be listening. "The truck belonged to someone from the school. That much I'm sure of. I saw them clearly from a distance. Even if they didn't see me, it all happened so fast. They put the boys in the back of the truck and drove off. I froze. When they disappeared, I ran and hid. I thought they might come for me too. Did you recognize anyone? A name, Victor? Michael pressed. Victor hesitated, as if saying the name would physically hurt him. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, Walter Green. He worked at the school. I saw him clearly. I never told anyone because he was important. Everyone respected him. I was afraid I'd vanish too. The name filled the room like a heavy stone. Emily exchanged a tense look with Michael. Green had been a respected figure. In Galway's school community, his name had never once appeared in any official report. A bitter rage began to grow in Emily's chest. It was becoming clear that police negligence had been far deeper than she had ever imagined. How many more secrets were buried beneath the surface? We have to take this to the police, Emily said with determination, but Victor quickly shook his head. No, please. They won't do anything. I tried years ago. They ignored me. No one wants to hear the truth in this town. Michael let out a deep sigh, understanding the weight of those words. Victor was right. The community had turned a blind eye for far too long. Then we'll find the proof ourselves, Michael said firmly. Thank you, Victor. You did the right thing. Victor nodded slowly, though his face remained etched with fear and paranoia. Emily felt deep gratitude for the tormented man who had carried such a heavy secret inside for nearly 2 decades. As they stepped out of Victor's cabin, the day was already fading. Emily and Michael drove straight to the Galway police station. In the dusty, nearly forgotten archive room, they began combing through old files and reports, searching for any mention of Walter Green. The hours passed slowly. Emily felt hope and frustration rising and falling inside her with each folder she flipped through. Finally, just as night was falling, she found an older, dustier folder than the rest. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Her heart raced when she saw, clearly typed, the name Walter Green, Michael. Emily called, her voice low but urgent. He's here. The detective rushed over, and together they began to read. There were complaints, notes, and old reports mentioning suspicious behavior from the school employee. Most disturbing was a note written by a police officer stating that the Vunco investigation had been closed by direct order with no clear explanation. Tears of rage filled Emily's eyes. Everything was clear now. Powerful people had been hiding the truth from the very beginning, and the police had deliberately ignored the evidence. They've been protecting him all these years, Emily whispered, her voice cracking as deep pain mixed with fury. Yes, and now we have to expose it all, Michael replied, studying the documents seriously. It's time everyone knows the truth. As they carefully secured the documents, Emily felt both relief and sorrow. The truth was finally beginning to surface, but she knew important pieces of the puzzle were still missing. The revelation about Green opened new and terrifying questions they would now have to face with courage. She looked again at the papers, gripping them tightly in her hands. She knew she couldn't stop now, no matter how painful the road ahead. For Ethan, for Lucas, Noah, and Jordan, she was determined to uncover the full truth and demand justice, no matter how long it took or how many obstacles stood in the way. Walter Green sat motionless in an armchair beside the window of a small room in the Santa Bridget nursing home. His figure was barely a shadow of what he once had been, extremely thin, with almost transparent skin that revealed every bluish vein beneath the fragile surface. His eyes, once sharp and clear, now looked clouded and lost, staring into nothingness with a vacant expression. The room smelled like medication and disinfectant, mixed with the persistent scent of old age. A soft beam of sunlight filtered weakly through the worn curtains, casting slow-moving shadows across the faded walls. Emily watched the old man with a mix of disgust and curiosity. It was hard to believe that this fragile, distant man had once been a central figure in such a dark and painful mystery. A tightness gripped her chest as she stepped forward. Michael stood near the door, silent and watchful, ready to intervene if needed. "Mr. Green," Emily began, her voice firm but controlled. "My name is Emily Harris. My son Ethan disappeared 18 years ago. I believe you know something that could help me." At first, the old man didn't react. His eyes remained lost in the void. But slowly, as if Emily's voice had pierced a fog in his mind, he turned his head slightly toward her. "Ethan," he murmured, barely audible. "The boys." "Yes," Emily confirmed, moving slowly closer. "Ethan Harris, Lucas Bennett, Noah Mitchell, Jordan Brooks. 4 boys. You knew them. You know what happened to them." Green's expression changed suddenly. His eyes lit up with a fleeting glimmer of clarity before sinking once more into confusion. "No, I don't remember," he stammered nervously. "No, I can't." Emily leaned in, gently placing a hand over his cold, wrinkled fingers. "Please, I need to know what happened. I can't go on without answers. You could give peace to these families." Green remained silent for several long seconds, breathing heavily. Then, with effort, he looked up at Emily, tears slowly emerging from his sunken eyes. "I didn't want to," he whispered faintly. "They were innocent, just children." Michael exchanged a tense glance with Emily, understanding that the wall of silence was finally beginning to crack. "What happened, Green?" Michael asked with steady pressure. "Tell us what you know. Who else was involved?" The old man took a deep breath, his body trembling slightly as he fought against his memories and fears. They weren't just children to them. They were a risk. They saw something they never should have seen. The old church, yes. It all happened there, he muttered with difficulty, staring ahead as if reliving every dark moment. Important figures. People everyone trusted. They said it was necessary, that no one would understand. A chill ran through Emily's body. Green's words stirred disturbing images, insinuations that chilled her heart. Her voice broke, but she pressed on. What was in that church? What did they do to the boys? The old man bowed his head, sobbing faintly, torn between guilt and fear. They took them there, under the church. A secret place no one was supposed to ever know. They said it would just be for a while. But they lied. As Green spoke, Emily felt the pieces of the terrible puzzle begin to fall into place. She remembered the abandoned St. Agnes Church, an old, decaying building on the outskirts of Galway. No one had paid attention to it in decades. Green then collapsed into an emotional breakdown, overcome by uncontrollable crying. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to be part of it. They forced me. The church had its secrets. It always did." Emily felt a mix of rage and pity for the tormented old man. Yet amid her pain, she also began to wonder how the community and police had ignored such obvious horror for so long. As she watched Green crumble, a vivid flashback overtook her mind. She could clearly imagine the 4 boys laughing as they innocently walked toward the old church that June afternoon, unaware they were stepping into a danger they'd never return from. She could almost hear Lucas cracking jokes, Noah nervously adjusting his glasses, and Jordan flipping his coin between his fingers to calm himself. Ethan, her beloved son, probably touching his earlobe gently, trying to make sense of why they were going into such a strange place. The image felt so real that Emily nearly screamed, wanting to warn them of the threat lurking behind the heavy door of that cursed church. "Please, Green, I need to know more," Emily said again, regaining her composure. Who were those important people? But Green now seemed entirely lost in his disturbing memories, mumbling incoherently about names and places, unable to provide clear answers. Below, beneath the church, that's all I know, he kept repeating. No one was ever supposed to find them. The conversation had reached its limit. Green couldn't offer anything else, completely drowned in his trauma. Michael gently touched Emily's shoulder, signaling it was time to go. As they left the nursing home, Emily felt her emotions threatening to consume her. The cold evening air did nothing to calm the fire burning in her chest. She looked at Michael, searching his face for any glimmer of hope. "Do you think he was telling the truth?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I do, Emily, but this is deeper than we thought. If the church is involved, there could still be people alive who are protecting those secrets." Emily clenched her fists tightly. The idea that respected figures had taken part in something so dark filled her with fury and determination. That night, back at home, she pored again over the police documents they had found days before. Every ignored report, every dismissed clue struck directly at her heart. Negligence and corruption had allowed evil to thrive in silence for years. In her mind, she saw the old abandoned church clearly. St. Agnes with its crumbling walls and broken windows seemed to be waiting, hiding terrible secrets beneath its foundations. Emily felt an urgent need to act. She couldn't waste another minute. She had come too far to back down now. Staring at the ceiling, she finally made the decision that would mark the next crucial step in her search for the truth. "I'm going to that church," she murmured into the stillness of the room. "I have to know what really happened in there." She knew it would be dangerous, that she might uncover things she wished she hadn't, but nothing mattered more than the truth about Ethan and his friends. That same night, while shadows covered Galway, and the town slept unaware what was about to be uncovered, Emily steeled herself for what lay ahead, ready to face the unknown and bring into the light a truth that had suffocated in darkness for far too long. Night had draped Galway in a thick blanket of clouds, hiding the stars and leaving the path to the old abandoned St. Agnes Church in complete darkness. From afar, the building's shadowy and menacing silhouette rose like a silent guardian of the town's darkest secrets. Emily felt a growing pressure in her chest as she slowly approached the forgotten place, wrapped in a cold and heavy atmosphere. When they reached the worn wooden doors, now covered in dry vines, Michael paused. He pulled a flashlight from his coat and aimed a beam of light at the door, which barely held up against time's wear. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" he asked softly, watching her closely. "More sure than ever," she replied, her voice filled with resolve. Together, they pushed the heavy doors open, producing a deep, eerie creak that echoed through the darkness. A wave of icy air greeted them, soaked with the scent of mold and rotting wood. Their footsteps echoed in every direction, creating the sensation of being inside a vast, abandoned void. With each step, tension grew inside Emily, a deep instinct, warning her of what they might find. The cracked walls, faded murals, and shattered windows scattered glass across the floor. Their flashlights revealed dusty wooden pews, rusted religious artifacts, and fallen chunks of plaster. Everything looked frozen in time, suspended in a haunting silence that made each moment heavier. "This way," Michael said, pointing to a side door left slightly ajar, leading to a darker, more decayed area of the church. Once they stepped through the darkness thickened. The air became suffocating, as if the building itself resisted their presence. They cautiously descended a few worn stone steps that led into a vast, sinister basement. As soon as their feet touched the ground, Emily's heartbeat spiked. They shone their flashlights on the walls, and what they saw made her breath catch. In her throat, there, drawn in faded charcoal but still visible, were desperate, childlike messages, rough, heartbreaking sketches crying out for help. She recognized the handwriting of Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan immediately. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, gently touching one of the drawings, showing a family holding hands. They were here. Trapped, terrified. Michael clenched his fists, struggling to contain his emotions. Each drawing revealed the children's overwhelming fear and desperation. There were dates, tally marks, and short messages begging for rescue, each one hitting Emily with unbearable force. How did no one know about this? She said, her voice breaking, her eyes filled with tears. Because someone didn't want it known. Michael replied bitterly. Someone powerful made sure it stayed hidden. They continued inspecting every wall, every corner. Suddenly, Michael stopped in front of a section where he felt a faint draft coming through a crack. "There's something here," he said, pressing against the wall. When he applied pressure, a hollow sound echoed. They exchanged a tense glance, then pushed harder. A narrow, hidden passage was revealed. "A secret passage," Emily whispered, feeling both fear and hope surge within. "Come on, Michael, we need to know where it leads." They carefully descended down a set of stone steps, their quickened breaths echoing in the tight underground corridor. The deeper they went, the narrower and darker it became, as if they were entering the very heart of the mystery. As they advanced, the walls seemed to close in on them, and Emily had to fight a rising sense of claustrophobia. The feeling of being trapped was overwhelming, but the need to uncover the truth drove her forward. Finally, they reached a small underground room, dimly lit by their flashlights. There they found more traces of the boys' suffering, old, worn blankets, broken plates, and tiny toys abandoned in a corner. Emily bent down and picked up a small plastic soldier, one of Ethan's favorites. It felt like her entire world was crumbling around her. "They were kept here, Michael. But how long?" she whispered in anguish. Michael inspected the room carefully, noticing marks on the floor suggesting frequent movement toward one of the back walls. There, he discovered another hidden door, this one even better concealed. They pushed together, and the wall groaned as it opened, revealing an older, darker, damp tunnel that stretched ahead like a gaping mouth into the unknown. "This doesn't end here," Michael said quietly. "Someone took the boys out of this place through that tunnel." Emily took a deep breath, summoning all her strength. They had to keep going. The mystery was deeper and darker than they had ever imagined. Every revelation was a blow to her soul, but there was no turning back now. They moved slowly through the ancient, narrow tunnel, the air growing colder as they descended further into the shadows. The silence was almost total, broken only by the tiny echo of their footsteps. Eventually, after what felt like an endless journey, they reached a massive wooden and iron door, sealed tight. It looked old, heavy, untouched for decades. Emily and Michael exchanged a look of steely resolve. That door wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a threshold into something darker, something dangerous. "What do you think is on the other side?" Emily asked in a near whisper, touching the cold, rough surface. "We'll find out soon," Michael replied firmly, though his face showed deep unease. As they stared at the heavy door, Emily felt a strange blend of fear and hope. They had come further than ever before, and the possibility of finally uncovering the truth felt real. But she also sensed that what lay beyond could be even more disturbing secrets someone had buried so deeply. No one was ever meant to find them. She inhaled deeply, gathering all the strength she had left. Whatever was behind that door, she was ready to face it. For Ethan, for Lucas, Noah, And Jordan, she would see this through to the very end. "We have to open it, Michael," she said with unwavering resolve. "There's no turning back now, Dot," and as her hands pressed firmly against the ancient door, the mystery they had chased for years felt closer than ever, on the verge of its darkest, most revealing truth. Emily moved slowly through the dark underground passage, with Michael close behind. His flashlight barely illuminated the path ahead. The air was heavy, damp, and thick with decades of undisturbed dust. The narrow walls seemed to close in tighter, with each step creating an almost unbearable sense of pressure. Their breathing echoed softly, breaking the suffocating silence around them. "How far do you think this goes?" Emily whispered, trying to steady the tremble in her voice. Michael stared ahead, focused, his face marked by mounting tension. It must lead somewhere hidden far from prying eyes. "Probably an isolated property, perfect for keeping secrets," he answered, forcing a calm tone. They walked for what felt like endless hours, exhaustion slowly weighing down their bodies. Finally, they noticed a shift. The air felt fresher, cleaner, signaling they were near an exit. Dot at the end of the tunnel, a narrow stone staircase led to a wooden hatch. Michael pushed it hard, managing to open it with effort. A cool night breeze swept through the corridor, offering relief and a renewed sense of dread. When they emerged, they found themselves on an abandoned rural property on the outskirts of Galway. The full moon dimly lit the landscape, revealing a decaying house overgrown with vegetation and a barn barely standing. The place was wrapped in a haunting silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees. Emily shivered. There was something deeply sinister about the sight. "They brought them here," she said with conviction, staring at the crumbling barn. Without another word, they slowly approached. The rotting wooden doors creaked open, revealing a shadowy interior blanketed in cobwebs. The floor was littered with dry leaves, dust, and debris. But one area stood out immediately. Part of the ground looked disturbed, recently tampered with. With hearts pounding, they began digging with their hands and anything they could find nearby. Moments later, the devastating truth emerged before them: the skeletal remains of the 4 boys, carefully buried in a desperate attempt to hide what had happened. Emily dropped to her knees, her strength vanishing all at once. Hot tears streamed down her face as her body trembled from years of grief and rage. "Oh, Ethan, my baby," she whispered, gently caressing the small items buried with the remains. A notebook filled with detailed entries in Liam's familiar handwriting, and a broken voice recorder, still recognizable as Ethan's favorite. Michael stood speechless, his face pale, feeling the crushing weight of injustice and sorrow. He carefully picked up the notebook and began reading aloud one of Liam's final entries. Day 4. "They won't let us go, but we're still together. Lucas keeps hope alive, Ethan sings to cheer us up, and Jordan never stops observing everything. I'm scared, but I believe we'll make it. We have to." Michael's voice shook, carrying the anguish of a child trapped in hell. Emily held the broken recorder in her hands, imagining Ethan trying to document his thoughts, desperate to leave behind a message. How could they do this to them? They were just children. Emily sobbed, pressing the recorder against her chest. After pulling herself together slightly, Michael took out his phone and called the police, explaining their discovery in brief but urgent detail. Minutes later, the still night was broken by flashing lights as police vehicles arrived, flooding the long-forgotten property with bright beams. Officers secured the scene while word of the discovery spread quickly through Galway. Soon, crowds began to gather nearby, faces filled with shock and sorrow. The news spread like wildfire, exposing not only the heartbreaking end to the case, but also the depth of negligence and corruption that had protected the perpetrators for years. Within hours, Galway boiled with a potent mix of grief and outrage. Meanwhile, Emily remained seated near the barn, nearly catatonic. It felt as if time had stopped, her mind spinning in an emotional storm. Suddenly, Michael approached hurriedly, holding a yellowed envelope in his hands. "Emily, someone left this in my car," he said, handing it to her with a puzzled expression. "No one saw who." "An anonymous informant, I guess." Emily took the envelope with trembling fingers and slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in neat, decisive script. Her eyes raced over the words, and her heart began pounding all over again. "Here are the names of those who took part and helped cover it up. Walter Green didn't act alone. Powerful people knew the truth and stayed silent. Now they must pay." Below the note was a list of names: local authorities, well-known community leaders, and former police officials directly tied to the negligence and cover-up of the crime. Emily looked up slowly, locking eyes with Michael. The weight of what they were holding was overwhelming, but it also meant that justice might finally be possible. "This is much deeper than we thought," Michael said gravely. "We have to take this to the police right away. They won't be able to ignore this." Emily nodded, feeling for the first time in years that a glimmer of hope was piercing through the darkness that had surrounded her for so long. Outside, the gathered crowd was demanding answers and justice. And now, thanks to this mysterious informant, the truth could finally come to light. As Emily looked at the people standing under the moonlight, she realized that this night marked the beginning of a real transformation in Galway. Justice, long delayed, was now within reach. Yet the anonymous source raised new questions. Who were they? Why come forward now, after all these years? What risk were they taking by sharing such explosive information? Those questions lingered in Emily's mind as she gripped the paper tightly in her hands, determined to make sure the full truth was revealed, no matter how painful it might be. As the police began to examine the list, Emily took a deep breath, gathering her strength to face what still lay ahead. But she no longer felt alone. Behind her stood a community united in pursuit of justice. The final chapter of this story had begun, and this time, it would not end until the truth was fully uncovered and the memory of Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan was truly honored. The investigation moved forward with unstoppable momentum after the anonymous list was delivered. Galway's police force, now under immense public and media pressure, reopened the case with renewed determination. Emily watched from a distance, torn between hope and distrust, knowing that the same web of corruption that had buried the truth for nearly 2 decades could still present dangerous obstacles. Within days, respected and powerful figures began to be arrested. Politicians, retired police officers, and influential community members were brought in for thorough interrogations. Each arrest shook Galway like an emotional earthquake, unearthing years of silence and complicity. The townspeople, initially shocked, soon gathered in public protests demanding full justice. This public pressure helped the investigation proceed without interference, finally revealing the horrific details of a case that had long haunted the town's conscience. The trial came sooner than expected. Inside the courtroom, Emily felt a painful sense of relief as she watched Walter Green and his accomplices finally face justice. Emotions filled every face in the room. Parents, friends, relatives, all united in shared grief, listened intently to the harrowing testimonies. Throughout the trial, Emily held her head high, though each detail revealed reopened old wounds. When she finally took the stand, her words were steady, clear, and filled with moving dignity. "I can't bring back my son Ethan or his friends," she said, voice trembling but resolute, "but I can make sure this kind of pain never happens again in our community. We need justice, transparency, and a real commitment to protect our children." A deep silence fell across the room. Even some of the accused looked down, unable to bear the weight of their guilt. The jury reached a verdict quickly. Green and his accomplices were sentenced to long prison terms, bringing a real sense of justice to the families and the community. When the sentence was read aloud, Emily closed her eyes, letting silent tears stream down her cheeks. No punishment could ever bring Ethan back, but the truth had finally prevailed. In the days that followed, Emily carefully organized a joint funeral for Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan. The entire town gathered beneath a calm gray sky for a powerful farewell. 4 small coffins lay side by side, covered in fresh flowers and objects cherished by each child. During the ceremony, Emily addressed the crowd once again, looking out at the hundreds of faces before her with deep gratitude. "Our children are not physically with us today," she began, her voice steady, "but they will live forever in our memories and in our hearts. Each of them left an unforgettable mark on our lives, reminding us of the beauty of friendship, innocence, and love. We must never forget what happened here. We must honor their memory by ensuring that injustice like this is never silenced again." Her words struck deep. The people of Galway felt a mix of sadness and renewed strength, recognizing the tireless courage of Emily, whose determination had forever changed the soul of the town. After the funeral, in a moving gesture, townsfolk came, one by one, to lay flowers, candles, and messages around a makeshift memorial dedicated to the 4 boys. Emily watched, overcome with emotion, feeling the community finally united in grief and healing, honoring the young friends who had once roamed these streets with innocent joy. Weeks later, sitting in her kitchen with a warm cup of tea in her hands, Emily reflected deeply on the long road she had traveled. She had faced the darkest moments, unearthed painful truths, and at last honored the memory of Ethan and his friends. Yet she still felt something unresolved, a quiet voice inside her urging her to transform her pain into something meaningful. One afternoon, while reading letters and messages from other families facing similar tragedies, Emily made a clear and irreversible decision. Her loss could not remain just a sad story. It had to become a force for real change. Without hesitation, she began working on founding an organization to support families going through similar situations. She named it Hope and Justice, a name that perfectly captured her mission. Little by little, the idea took form. Friends, neighbors, and compassionate members of the community joined her, offering their time, resources, and unconditional support. Before long, the organization became a powerful national voice, demanding justice, transparency, and real protections for missing children. Emily found renewed purpose in this mission. Every time she heard news of a case solved because of her initiative, she felt the memory of Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan grow stronger. Their legacy was no longer just a tragedy. It had become a source of strength and relentless advocacy for justice. On a quiet evening, sitting in Ethan's room, which she had preserved all these years, Emily looked out the window at the stars. In a soft voice, almost a whisper, she spoke to the living memory of her son. "Ethan, my sweet boy, I never imagined I'd have to say goodbye so soon, but because of you, I can help others. Today, your light and your friends guides the path toward truth and justice." As she said those words, Emily felt a deep calm wash over her. Though the pain would never disappear completely, it now had meaning. She had turned her deepest loss into a lasting legacy of hope and resilience. The town of Galway, forever marked by the tragedy but also strengthened by Emily's unyielding fight, continued to support her mission. Each year, on the anniversary of the truth's discovery, a touching ceremony was held to honor the four boys and reaffirm the community's commitment to justice and child protection. The city, once silenced, had become a national symbol of transparency and unity, a place that would never again allow corruption and indifference to endanger its most vulnerable. At last, Emily understood that while the past could never be changed, the future was still in her hands. Hope and justice grew beyond Galway, expanding across Ireland and eventually reaching international scope. The story of Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Jordan was no longer just an unsolved tragedy. It was a powerful reminder of the need to listen, to protect, and to fight for justice in every corner of the world. And so, in the quiet of that peaceful night, Emily closed her eyes, feeling, after so many years, that her heart was at peace. Her final chapter, though born from darkness, continued forward, lit by renewed hope and an unshakable purpose. And she knew, without a doubt, that as long as she lived, she would never stop fighting for truth and justice.